Okay, Proverbs 1 and verse 5. Proverbs 1:5 it says, "A wise man will hear and will increase learning, and a man of understanding shall attain unto wise counsels." So let's look at the first part of that verse. A wise man will hear. So there's two different ways in which you can hear. You have a physical way, which pretty much everybody that's not deaf can do. And then you have I guess you could call it a spiritual way or a different way anyway. And I'll show you what I'm talking about. So first of all, the primary definition is, of course, to perceive or have the sensation of sound, to possess or exercise the faculty of audition, which means to hear, of which the specific ear organ is the ear. I probably didn't need to really define that for everybody, but just thought I would take care of that in case anybody was confused. So this type of hearing is done by wise and foolish alike. Everybody that has the faculty of hearing can their eardrums can perceive vibrations coming from somebody else's vocal cords, right? The Pharisees could hear in this way. They heard Christ's words in that physical sense, and we know that because they wanted to kill him for it. And that's what he said in John 8, 37 through 38. And I don't need to go there for now, but you all know about that. But then if you look on down, number 4 is the exercise, to exercise the auditory function intentionally, to give ear, hearken, or listen. There's a difference between hearing and listening, right? Hearing, it takes no effort at all. You can hear something when you're not paying attention, when you don't understand it, but listening is different. Listening is intentionally hearing. This type of hearing is unique to the wise. And not everybody can hear in this way, especially when it comes to spiritual things. Those same Pharisees could not hear Jesus' words with understanding for 2 reasons. First and foremost, they were not of God. They didn't have a spiritual capacity. They weren't regenerated. And Jesus said that he that is of God heareth God's words, ye therefore hear them not, because ye are not of God. But the second reason they didn't want to, or that they couldn't hear his words with understanding, is because they were fools and they didn't want to. So even if you have the ability to hear and to listen, if you don't want to listen, you're not going to get anything, right? You have to have the desire to know something. So the result of the second type of hearing is that wise men will increase learning. So when you listen intentionally, you can actually learn something. So like I said, in order to increase learning, we must listen intentionally. We must, as the scripture says, bow down our ears, apply our hearts to understanding. Proverbs 22 and verse 17. It's funny, I didn't look at that sentence in the outline, and then as soon as I said it, I looked, and that's exactly what the sentence said. So, Proverbs 22 and verse 17. Bow down thine ear, and hear the words of the wise, and apply thine heart to my knowledge. And you've probably done this yourself when you really want to hear and learn something, and somebody's talking, and maybe there's background noise, and you kind of turn your ear right towards the person so you can really hear. That's what we have to do, in a spiritual sense especially. And then the other thing is, whenever you're talking, you can't do much listening, right? So if you want to increase learning, you have to listen more than you talk. This doesn't apply to sermons, but it applies to other areas of life, of course. It doesn't apply to sermons to the guy that's talking anyway, but to the people that are listening it applies. So it applies to everybody but me at the moment. But I listen to sermons too, so I learn whenever I'm not teaching. James 1 and verse 19. James 1:19. James says, "Wherefore, my beloved brethren, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath." There's that old saying, and I'm sure you've heard it before, but that you have 2 ears and 1 mouth, and you should use them proportionally. You probably heard that before. So then the second part of Proverbs 1:5. A man of understanding shall attain unto wise counsels. So the thing about a wise man is that he has enough sense to know that he doesn't know everything. All right? So there's nothing wrong with not knowing everything or not knowing many things. If you think about it, no person could possibly know everything. No person could know everything about one particular field. As a matter of fact, probably no person could know something about a small sliver, some subset of one particular field. If you get into anything deeply, you'll find out that there's just so much to know, and that's just one little thing. So none of us can possibly know everything about anything. There's two ways to be wise. You can either know information personally, or you can know where to find the information or who to ask to find the information. So a man of understanding realizes that he doesn't need to be an expert in every discipline. He only needs to know someone who is. I think like whenever we bought that house up there, and I was by no means an expert in home maintenance, but I knew Austin, right? And Austin can attest to this. I called up Austin on numerous occasions saying, how do I do this? What do you think the problem is? What do I do here? And even got FaceTime and showed him pictures and all this stuff. And so I didn't need to know everything. It would have been nice if you lived closer. That would have certainly helped. But as I was doing that, I was learning myself, so that was good. But that's just one example. I don't need to be an expert mechanic because I've got Austin, I got my brother, I got other people, I'm glad Austin's in the church, He's definitely useful for many things. Now, when a wise man needs to increase learning, rather than proudly and foolishly staying at home and trying to figure it out himself, he instead attains unto wise counsel. And attain means to come so far as, succeed in coming to, get. To attain to means to reach or arrive at. So the man of understanding will go to wise counsel. He's not going to wait for wise counsel to come to him, because remember about wise counsel. Remember what it says there that it's like deep waters. You got to draw it out. So the guy that's really wise isn't going to go around lecturing people with his wisdom. He's just going to sit around and wait for somebody to ask him a question. So if you're wise, then you're going to attain to that wise counsel. I'll gladly personally take unsolicited advice from wise men, or from anybody for that matter. If somebody wants to give me advice, I'll take it. I might not necessarily agree with it, but I'll certainly hear it. But if it's from wise people especially, I'll gladly take it. My pastor friends have occasionally said to me, if I wasn't asking for something like, well, let me give you a piece of unsolicited advice, and I'm more than happy to take it. Because sometimes you just don't even think to ask. You don't realize that there's, like they say, you don't know what you don't know, and sometimes you don't even know that you need to ask, right? So I'll gladly do that. But I usually try to seek out first from them wise counsel before making an important decision. And I would say before you make any major life-changing decision, then you should seek counsel. And I do myself. And I was just thinking about just some major things. And of course, every little thing, should I buy a Snickers or a Twix? I don't know. Let me get somebody on the phone here and ask what they think the best. Obviously, you don't need to ask counsel for everything. Yeah. Which one of these will kill me quicker or slower or slowly or whatever. But things like going to college or choosing a career or changing careers or changing jobs or retirement planning or retiring, buying a house, buying a car or other large expenditures, engagement in marriage. There's a huge one. Talk about lifelong implications. Raising children, education plans for children, investing large amounts of money, starting a business, major health decisions. Anything like that would have major implications for the rest of your life or for a long time, or have made a big deal on your finances. I think about investing my entire retirement portfolio in Zimbabwe dollars or something. You might want to ask somebody about that first, but wouldn't have been a good idea to do that 10 years ago. But anyway, anything like that, seek counsel. I certainly do. I'm not going to make any important decision like that without doing that. Especially buying a house now. Let me tell you what, after that previous experience, it turned out okay, thankfully. And I did get counsel on that too. I called up a couple different people, and I had some friends come over and look at it too, and all that. But there'd be things that I would be looking for now that I didn't know enough to look for before. And so anyway, you just don't want to get yourself into some pickle because you didn't get the counsel that you should have. In all these areas, counsel should be sought, this is really important, before already having one's mind made up. Because I think I've noticed this, that usually, and I mean, it's easy to fall into. Usually one of two things happen if you don't do it the right way. You either just don't ask, because you know that if you ask for the counsel, whoever you're going to is going to say that's not a good idea and you don't want to hear that. So you just don't ask. Or you ask because you feel like, I probably should, but you just want the rubber stamp. So you've already made up your mind, and then you ask hoping that you get the answer that you want. But if possible, and sometimes it's hard to do, because by the time, if you're looking to make a decision like that, maybe you've done a lot of research on your own, you're trying to figure it out on your own, and then you've pretty much convinced yourself of it, and then by the time you go ahead and ask, it's like you're just hoping whoever you ask says, yeah, that's a good idea. It's best to try before you've made up your mind to get the counsel, right? Because it's pretty hard to change your mind once you're set, you're dead set on doing something. Remember, the man of understanding will attain unto wise counsel. He's going to seek out that counsel. The only man that will learn is he who wants to learn and voluntarily seeks instruction. Because the person that, that just has some wise guy approach him and say, hey, let me tell you what to do, he's not going to learn anything because he doesn't want to learn, right? You've got to be searching for it first. There's an old adage which says, you've probably heard this one, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. Anybody ever heard that one? That's an old saying, and it's pretty well true. And this is why I say it's a fool's errand to send most young people these days to college with a check in their hand, expecting them to get an education. I'm not saying it's wrong to go to college, but I'm saying everybody goes to college nowadays, and I've been to college, and probably some of you have too, and I know what goes on for the